Okay, welcome everybody to this last session of Connect, Inspire, Share for the year, our fifth for the year. It's great to join you guys again on behalf of the committee, Alice, May, Tiana, and myself. We're really happy to have Steve, a colleague of mine, Stephen Thurlow, here today. So I'll just give you a brief bit of background on Stephen. He's taught academic writing since 1999 and doctoral writing since 2010. As well as working as an academic learning skills advisor, he has had experience as a professional and creative nonfiction writer and holds a master's degree in this area from UTS. He recently completed an interdisciplinary PhD in applied linguistics and education at the University of Melbourne on how doctoral students and academics from arts disciplines-based areas understand and act, or indeed fail to act, on the notion of creativity. Apart from a fascination in the many underexplored intersections between academic and creative writing, he is interested in writer voice, agency, and identity. So Steve is here today, a colleague of mine for 13 years. So we've been working together that long, Steve.
Amazing.
Amazing. We joined academic skills at UniMel within a week of each other. We went through in the same interview group. So we certainly have trod this path side by side, I'd like to say. Steve is going to talk to us today about the area he's very interested in terms of what he's done in his PhD and what he's personally interested in terms of student work. And that is the creative collisions, advising, creativity, and academic writing, with a little bit of a nod to it being in the age of AI. So I'll be quiet now. I will be coming back a little bit later in this because I had my own creative encounter a few weeks ago, which Steve and I have talked extensively about, which I'll give you as a miniature case study before we head into breakout rooms. But hey, enough of my yakking. Steve Thurlow is going to take over. Thanks, Stephen.
Thanks, everyone. So yes, welcome to the session. And yes, you've got the Stephen and Stephen show today. So I think we're both happy to be called Steve. But I'm Stephen, if you want to differentiate us. So yes, welcome. It's a big topic. So a couple of big areas together there: creativity, academic writing, and AI. Let's see if we can do justice to them today. So let's maybe start off with an overview. So basically, we're going to divide it up into 4 parts today. And for the first half an hour, sounds like a long time, but hopefully you'll be entranced. I'm going to talk a little bit about my research and my findings from my research about creativity and academic writing, but particularly doctoral writing. The second part, which Steve will be involved with, is talking, and also myself, talking about creativity in the context of the AALL advisor. So looking at intersections there with our practice as advisors. And the third part will be looking at creativity, academic writing, and AI. So looking at how maybe we're looking at creativity anew through the lens of AI. And writing, of course, is a hot topic once again. What is human writing? What is machine writing? What is where does creativity sit in all that? So look, like I said, big topics, and I'll try to do justice, but see how we go. So before we start, I'd like to do an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting, or yes, I'm talking from the lands of the Wurundjeri and Woiwurrung people of the Eastern Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. So I just thought I'd put this slide up towards the beginning. Yes, who am I to speak about creativity? So this word creativity, it's a little bit of a buzzword, but yeah, where do I come into that picture? So I'm a writing practitioner. I'm a writer. I'm a writing teacher, and I'm also a researcher. So I've recently completed a doctorate looking at creativity and specifically doctoral writing contexts here at my own institution, UniMelb, and I looked at the Faculty of Arts in particular for my research. So I came into my doctoral studies with a strong belief that creative writing and academic writing should not be quarantined from one another. And I believe it's part of the job description of all writers to stretch boundaries, play with convention, and transform patterns of discourse. That includes academic writers as well as so-called creative writers. So look, that's a little bit about me. So I just want to rewind maybe a couple of steps here and talk about the trouble with creativity in academic and doctoral writing. So it doesn't at first appear like it's a troublesome concept, but in my practice, in my day-to-day, I often find myself presented with very competent and very passionate students who struggle to write up what they're passionate about in a coherent and engaging manner. So writers often tell me that they can't use specific word structures or approaches in their work, as these are forbidden by their teachers or the discipline. Writers rarely considering the processes and practices that they need to get through when they are preparing their written work. Writers with scant interest and occasionally quite active resistance to delving into their writerly selves. So what makes them a writer, what makes them a better writer, maybe how writing develops in their context. And an absence of this concept or notion of creativity and creative practices amongst students. So thinking about doctoral students amongst their peers, their supervisors, and maybe everyone else as well. So look, these are the maybe troublesome aspects of putting these two terms together, so creativity and academic and/or doctoral writing. Just a little bit about my research. So I had some big questions, particularly that first one. So what is creativity in doctoral writing context and where is it located? So the first question is forming the basis of my talk today. The second question and the third question emerged in a kind of incremental way throughout my study. So like I said before, I was focusing on my own institution. I was looking at the Faculty of Arts here at UniMelb, and I honed in eventually on 4 multilingual doctoral writers. So that included another maybe complex or complicating aspect as well, but I'm particularly interested in second language writers or multilingual writers. So I followed these 4 multilingual writers throughout their whole candidature. So I met them in their first year and I stuck with them until they submitted in their, I think one of them submitted in minimum time, 3.5 years full time. And the other one, I think was 5 years, closer to 6 years. And the third point, which I probably will touch on today, but not in depth, is the relationship between writer's voice and creativity in doctoral writing. So that seems to be a very, very close relationship. So we'll maybe get onto that in a bit. So look, first up, I'd like to maybe frame this notion of creativity. So put it into a little box, or maybe a series of boxes. So looking at this thing called creativity. I thought I'd just start with a couple of nice quotes here. One from Alan Maley. I'll just let you run your eyes across that. And one from somebody who's a little bit of a seminal figure in the field of creativity studies and linguistics, which is Ron Carter. So look, they're both really saying it's very difficult to pin down this concept. It's a little bit resistant to getting pinned down. And I think we have to take that on board. It's bandied around the university a lot. I did take a note of how it's used in the academy, and it is used a lot by certain areas, certainly used a lot by marketing and future students' activities, but yes, used in different ways throughout the academy. So look, everybody has their own idea of what is creativity, but in the setup for today, I think Steve sent round a request for you to think about a creative encounter of your own. So I'd like you to maybe think about that for a second and think about, where was the creativity located in that encounter? So was it from a text that you were reading or helping to put together? Maybe an idea somebody said to you, or an idea that you read about, conversation, maybe something completely different. So why do you remember it as a creative encounter, and what aspects or features made it creative for you? So just maybe hold that in your mind, and we will come back to that. We'll come back to that creative encounter. So look, when I started my own doctorate, my research, I went with quite a traditional conceptual framework of creativity, and this one is from TIN 2016. So splitting up creativity into 4 quadrants, if you like, and the 4 quadrants. So we've got personal creativity. So creativity as an innate or a personal trait, something that can be tapped into or developed. As a product, so product that maybe follows a creative process, and maybe the product is the writing, and the use of creativity there is maybe often linked to style, the style of the written language, or literariness. So the literary quality of the language. Practices, so there we're talking about the process of the writer. So maybe the attitude or the critical stance of the writer and what they go through when they're producing writing. And then we've got all these big things down the bottom, which TIN encapsulated in calling them social, cultural, political, or environmental forces. And these are actually swirling around in the academy. And from my dealings with doctoral writers, I found these were the most significant. So all these forces of the environment that these writers found themselves in. So it wasn't so much about the personal, the product, the practices, but what they were exposed to in their candidature, because I was looking at doctoral students. So that was interesting for me, looking at that, yes, environment where creativity maybe was encouraged or discouraged or really just neglected. So from that initial conceptualization and from further investigations, a couple of conclusions there. They're talking about creativity, creative practices in the academy. Yes, it's abstract, it's occluded, it's spectral, a little bit haunting, but with a potential for transgression and disruption. So this gets back to different people having different ideas of what creativity is. So it's often confused and or conflated with other synonymous terms. And in doctoral writing contexts, originality is a big one there. Novelty or newness is also sitting there with creativity. And a big one in the doctoral space is innovation. Actually, it's a big one in the academy. You do hear that word a lot. So, yes, those terms are used by both academic writers and readers. Focusing on the academic readers by themselves, though, so these tend to be the supervisors in the doctoral context. They associated it with expressive or literary language. So, for example, the use of metaphors, playing with words, or other creative writing techniques. And that was often seen to be not such a great thing, even in a humanities-focused faculty, like the Faculty of Arts. This sort of association with creative writing was seen to be something not so great. And I can probably talk about that a little bit later. So looking at all these things swirling around, looking at the paths these four multilingual doctoral writers took through their candidature, we can see some of them taking a turn or a path towards creativity and some turning away from it. So at the beginning, they're all kind of interested in creativity. I met them through a writing workshop I ran, which was focused on creativity in writing. So they're all keen at the beginning, but somehow their paths diverged. So let's talk about their kind of paths and the queering of their paths. So look, my conceptual framework moved on. I used some insights from a British Australian critical humanities scholar called Sarah Ahmed. So Ahmed writes in the fields of feminism and also critical university studies. And if you're looking for a seminal text from Ahmed, I'd recommend this one, What's the Use? So using Ahmed's work on paths and path making, she identifies a queer use as a deviation from straight path into more shadowy or indistinct territory. So I liken this to my doctoral writers who were struggling with maybe creatively queering their work. One of them got there, the others didn't really get there at all. So they all started on the same path, but they went different ways with creativity. So this creative queering could reside in the ideas and or the content and or the expression or form of these ideas. So the second one there is more maybe about the style. So doctoral writers who persevere with a creative or an unconventional path have to face a lot of issues to do with self-censorship. So even though these writers do want to be creative in their work and seen as creative writers, they face censorship and self-censorship. So there's resistance from their readers as well. And if they get through those forces, then perhaps they're able to misfit creativity or a form of creativity into their work. So bear with me. I've just got a couple more slides about the writer's paths. I think we'll be going into less theoretical territory now, maybe after this slide. So I promised to return to this idea about writer's voice. So it seems creativity and writer's voice are very, very interrelated. So yes, we could even say you can't be creative if you don't have your own writer's voice. So yes, querying the frame or looking at these doctoral writers' paths through queer theory shows us very clearly how writers can use their voice and when they can use their voice to be creative at critical moments in their studies, or indeed turn away from it. The realization that a creative deviation may be possible often occurred after a critical incident. It's often a troubling event involving a critical reader or an academic gatekeeper. So these gatekeepers would turn back their creativity or stymie it in some way. So look, at these critical moments or crossroads moments, these writers could activate their creativity or could decide to activate their creativity in very diverse ways. So at a macro level in the writing, it could occur through the use of an innovative methodology, for example, a novel theorization, or at a much more micro level, even the use of a creative turn of phrase in their writing, like an idiom or a metaphor, or possibly just keeping in an extra long sentence. So I'll talk a little bit more about sentences and sentence length later, because it's maybe a little bit of a hot button issue in academic writing circles. So voice, I found, is often a lightning rod for discussions about the writer's position and their identity. And this is particularly common in maybe the newer disciplines, the ones that don't have a long history, maybe they're still emerging, or maybe more hybrid disciplines. So I work particularly with the Faculty of Fine Arts and Music, and we have a lot of hybrid and or new disciplines down here, such as music therapy, or even things like dance have a very short disciplinary history or an academic disciplinary history. So all these conversations about where the writer sits, how they present in their writing, their identity, their affordances they can have in their writing, everything is still up for grabs in a way, compared to disciplines with a much longer history, such as politics or, I don't know, maybe education, etc. So look, just to maybe recap some key research findings. Yes, hidden, liminal, frequently awkward, a lot of silence and liminality around this idea of creativity in doctoral writing contexts. The ones I looked at, and I think in most doctoral writing contexts, this is the case. So out of my 4 participants, the 4 multilingual writers I traced for 3, 4, 5 years, 2 of them, although they were very attracted to this concept of creativity, creative practices, they felt very reluctant to leave the safe path of how they felt a doctorate should look and sound. At the end of the doctorate, they also lacked the time and the energy to take risks with something like creativity. So their resulting written products, I think, even though I didn't see the final version, I think lacked creativity. Another writer struggled mightily with lots of things in her writing, also creativity. That was Ellie. And the one male writer I looked at, Renato, he was the one who had the most success, I felt, with incorporating what he called crumbs of creativity in his work. So he was confident, he wanted to challenge expectations, he drove through bits of creativity into his reader and made sure his reader accepted what he'd produced. So just before I go on to Steve and the more practical exercise, I just wanted to show you two of the writer's paths. So I've chosen Ellie and Renato because Ellie didn't quite get there. I thought, or I observed with her creativity. So if we think about Ellie's voice, so excuse the rough diagram here, but this is supposedly a picture of Ellie's voice. So when she started her doctorate in 2015, she had a strong, probably quite creative voice, and she had many resources and strategies up her sleeve. A lot of them came from her first language, but also second language. So writing outside the doctorate amplified her voice. She did quite a bit of writing outside the doctorate. She was also into creative writing. She wrote poems in Farsi. She used a lot of metaphors in her academic work in Farsi. Lengthy sentences. She liked to write in scenes. Yes. And then what happens towards the end of the path, the disciplinary restrictions come in. So we can see the teeth there coming in on her voice. So her readers calling for plain and direct language, both censorship and self-censorship I found there of her creativity, her creativity and her maybe a few L2 or EAL writing issues creeping in there. She lost her confidence and she was prohibited by one of her supervisors from using the non-scientific I, which meant that she was squeezed out of her final thesis, which was maybe not a good result for her work, or the originality and creativity of her work. I'm just going to compare that to, just comparing that to Renato. He had a different path. His voice was much stronger throughout. It grew, maybe in stature. It was squeezed a little bit towards the end, but he was a great one for playing with creativity. He played with language. He enjoyed the creative process. He was just a super confident and playful writer, which got him through the whole process. So look, I'm really not doing justice to their paths or what happened to their voices, but I just thought I'd throw those up as a little bit of a visualization of what happened to these two doctoral students. So let's draw it back to writing. Let's draw it back to what it means to be a doctoral writer or an academic writer in this place, the academy, and dealing with this notion of creativity. So there it is. It can be a positive force. So it can help the writer get through their studies. It gives them something. It's something where their passion can be invested in, even though we have to admit it's quite its exact shape and form can be quite ambiguous. So look, on the other side, we've always got a temptation here to emulate or copy what others have done in their writing. So there's the force of repetition, if you like, or the template. So this is doubly tempting when combined with the force of maybe what supervisors or disciplines or disciplinary discourses teach us, either consciously or unconsciously. However, breaking through the silence and risk associated with creativity is still possible, and I found it is possible to do this. And why might writers really want to persevere with this and maybe break through into creativity? Seems there's a great connection here between creativity and originality. So creativity can help students bring forth alternate ways of knowing or knowledge, and to, incorporate self-expression and assist reader engagement. So creativity is a great helper with those two things. And lastly, maybe to critique and change the dominant discourses that we all live with here in the academy. So these three reasons are from Tardy, 2016. So look, that's probably it from me and about my research. I just wanted to flash this up, if you don't mind. If you want to go further into this area, some things which came out of my research. So the blog post, which is the first entry, is maybe really easy to read and really short. So maybe that's a good one to start off with if you would like to go any further. Yeah, so anyway, that's coming to you on the slides. So they'll be coming up after today. So look, maybe let's move on to the close intersections with our practice here as AALL advisors. So Steve's going to drive this session. So just before he starts, I just wanted to focus in on the AALL advisor and provide some context here. So looking at what I did in my research, we can see creativity is a little bit, should we call it problematic or troublesome? Students tend to approach it in a pretty tentative manner. So they're cautiously enthusiastic, but often that withers when faced with strong centering forces, when they're asked for appropriate writing or suitable writing from their disciplinary teachers or the institution. However, there's reasons to persevere here, and we've seen how students can persevere if they do a little bit of pushing. So just a couple of points there. So the third point there, I just wanted to show you a rubric that I picked up from an education subject. So we actually don't see that word creativity a lot in rubrics. I think because it's very, very hard to assess. But I think I got this one a couple of years ago. So from a graduate level education subject. So it displays the UniMelb grading criteria there: pass, H3, H2B, H2A, and then finally at the highest level, H1. So it's clustering there under H1, and it's in a couple of different areas. So they're actually using the word original and creativity. Oh, there's originality down there. So look, it's not often spoken about, but occasionally you do find it in university documents like this. And I think it probably freaks everyone out because, yeah, very hard to assess that. But, you know, good on this academic for having a go. Over to Steve, and I'll just maybe look at the questions while he's talking.
Sure. Pardon me. Thanks, Steve. And I agree with Steve because one of the roles I do at where we are at Uni Melb is to review rubrics and task descriptions that academics have put together. And you do often, well, not often, you sometimes see originality, but certainly rarely would you see creative nods within the rubric. And also, again, there's that what we saw there in that rubric example is that the nod to creativity, such as it is only in the high band, which is sort of to imply that anybody getting lower results than a distinction, ergo, is not or can't be creative. You know, they might have had a go at it, not entirely successfully, but that's not acknowledged in the rubric. So that's interesting because it sort of underscores that marginalized or liminal space for creativity that Steve's been talking about this whole time. And that's certainly reflected. And I agree, good on the academic for having a go at putting it in there, but it's interesting that for me, that it was only sort of squashed up in that one little area. So Steve and I have been talking about this case for a couple of weeks because there's a really super interesting one that an education student came to me in a one-to-one individual appointment, individual booking, a consultation that I had with this student. And the topic or the thing she was writing on was in the subject of 21st century literacy practices and communities. And it was sort of an open task, fairly open task that got them to really position themselves. You're not seeing the whole thing here, you're sort of seeing the first part of it, which got them to position themselves in terms of how they perceive their literary selves. And as a result of being in the subject, how they saw themselves and how that changed and what that meant for them. So focusing on this main idea of how they saw themselves as being locally or globally literate. And as we read through the task description together, we sort of both agreed that it gave the students scope to react to this in a way that they wanted to. And she put it to me very early on that she felt that it gave her license to act creatively and to have a creative response to this, which she certainly did. And I agreed with a couple of caveats, which was interesting because it sort of it manifested itself in some very interesting ways, because this was essentially a written piece. It was an essay, if you like, but again, I agreed with her that there was space or scope for a creative response. Steve, if you just advance to the next one. And I'll show you part of what Annie, this is the student who we worked with. I've de-identified this, and Annie's not a real name, but it was this idea that she had that she could frame herself as 4 different people, because that's how she saw herself, as 4 different people. And she wanted to frame her literary journey or pathway or perception of self in terms of 4 selves. And the first one was, sorry, Steve, can we, yeah. The first one was her as a traditional good little girl, this is her words, not mine. The second self as having started her second life as a university student in a different country. Her third self as a professional. Interestingly, at the University of Edinburgh for some reason, I'm not sure why. And then finally, as someone who returned home to teach at a bilingual school in a tropical island in China. So certainly when she was being creative, she was seeing herself very creatively in terms of where she'd end up.
Yeah, so the last 2 there were imagined future selves, weren't they?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, they were future selves. Yeah, so this hadn't happened yet, and which was another really interesting creative aspect to this, because there was certainly a self-perceived past self, which was her reality, and her intentional, or where she wanted to be as a future self. And I was asking her about this. Is this what you want, or is this sort of just made up for the purposes of the assignment? She said, no, this is how I see myself. This is where I want to be in terms of my literary self as a teacher.
Is it
Studying
literary or literacy?
literary self. So where she sees herself in a I think, well, both uses of the words. I think the task brief talked about a literary self, and then your literacy journey. I think it used both terms from memory.
Yes, literacy journey. Yeah.
And she framed the start of the piece like this, and I sort of had to take more than a few minutes to position myself in relation to this, because some of the things that Steve was talking about before about instant reactions to manifestations of creativity can make or break the creativity right at the start, right? Because we're in this third space, that liminal space of saying, yes, this is okay, or, oh, geez, no, I wouldn't try that. And so I really had to be careful here, because she was clearly keen on this as a piece. And so we started reading through it, and this wasn't the end of the creativity, because the next page had a visual metaphor of her living in a cave with literacy washing over particular parts of the cave and inaccessible to other parts. So it was like, it was really a gutsy move.
It was sustained, it sounds like, yes.
It sure was. It really was. And
even the formatting there is,
yeah,
it's not what you usually see. So you have to get kind of used to that.
Yeah. So I had some decisions to make internally about how I would react to this. And as an advisor, I felt I really wanted to say to her, look, I like where you're going with this, as long as it's satisfying the requirements of the question, right? As long as you are talking about a literacy journey and you're positioning as a local and global literate self, then yeah, I think you can do this. But that was my only caveat about stepping on or limiting her creative self. So I just wanted to share that with you, and Steve invited me to sort of maybe preface the breakout rooms with my own creative encounter. And we've got you to sort of think about your own, any that you may have had, just to inform it with a very, very quick case study B, and Steve knows this one. There used to be this famous assignment which used to do the rounds at Melbourne, where I think it was biology, where the academic got the students to look at the lenses of the eye through whatever way they wanted to, whether it was a sunrise or being blind or whatever. They just were encouraged to do that. And that was another sort of a manifestation of how creativity could be encouraged within the academic context. Steve, do you want to take back over now and direct this?
Look, I'm just going to set up the breakout room. So, Steve, do you want to just run through?
Sure.
Yeah, the questions there.
Yeah, absolutely.
What we're asking them to do.
Yeah. Okay. So, again, don't run away from breakout rooms. This is your chance to meet each other and have a discussion here. Okay. So think back to a creative encounter that you may have had, thinking about the one that we asked you to think about prior to coming in, that builds on the lived experience and the perspectives about creativity explored today and that have been put to you today. And we've got, sorry, we've got 3 questions. Sorry, gee, something got in my throat at the perfectly wrong time. How encouraging are we of creativity, I guess, with as advisors rather than academics, and how encouraging should we be? Can we get away with being a devil's advocate when discussing creativity that students should always be conscious of? Or, around towing the institution line, don't write that, that's not a good idea. Ultimately, are we fitters or enablers or misfitters of creativity in our work with student writers and writing, using perhaps the cases that Steve has talked about and that I've presented to you as a framework for discussion? All right, I think Steve has opened the rooms, And Steve, you'll call us back at some
Yep.
some
So
point.
maybe about 10 minutes to do this, or to work, or to discuss this in the rooms. That would be great.
Perfect. All right. We'll see
Thanks.
you all soon. Okay, recording again.
Oh, thanks, Steve. So I just wondered if anybody wanted to bring something from the breakout rooms into the larger group. Anything that we want to share here with the big group, even though it's not so big today? Any nuggets that could do with sharing? So we are going to have a discussion for the last 10 minutes, like a broader discussion, but last chance to bring up something from the breakout rooms.
I can have a go, Stephen.
Mm-hmm.
So in our group, we discussed how creativity is really hard to pin down, and we talked about our experiences with creativity, and we talked about something very visual and vivid and evoking of imagination in one of the writings that we saw recently. So it can be really specific and visual and vivid rather than being very abstract. And yeah, we agree that it's a very subjective thing, creativity. And we also talked about how to reconcile readership, what a reader might need from a piece of writing, and the creativity of the author. Like, yeah, but in our work, we advise students to be clear, right? And to convey themselves very clearly to an audience. But also we encourage argument and having students having their own voices in their writings. For me, that's a healthy balance, because creativity doesn't mean anything goes, I don't think. And then we discussed the relevance of creativity in reading practices as well. It's not just writing, because effective writers start with being effective readers, and we connect writing to how reading can work aesthetically, instrumentally, and critically. So it links to my own research as well. And we agreed that creativity is a mindset, a process, and a product as well.
Oh, thanks, Ha. Yeah, that's valuable. Nice summation. Okay, maybe Anna, would you like to raise something?
I sort of raised my hand because no one volunteered. I think we asked a lot of open-ended questions. And I liked what we've just heard about the process and the product. I think we didn't use these words, but we talked about different student cohorts and how individual it is, how some students don't want to go beyond what is asked for them, and encouraging them early in their candidature, if they are speakers of English as an additional language, maybe a lot to process and a lot to ask for. And how, not everyone has a thesis that's read by hundreds and thousands of people. It's just a piece of writing, and then there are avenues for publications and other things alongside and afterwards to express yourself differently. To me, it's just telling the students about all the options available, and for them to find the balanced approach that works for them. No one told me to be brave, but I was brave enough to do something that I'm still proud of. But
something creative?
Yes, a smiley in my thesis. So in 2005. So looking back, I think I was pretty bold and creative with that.
And ahead of your time, maybe, as well.
One of the examiners definitely thought that, yes.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, oh, wow, everyone should do it from now on. It was like, I hope I'll never see it again. So I took my risks. I passed with almost no amendments, just some missing references and stuff.
Courage and courageous actions do come into creativity.
But I really wanted it there. So I think, that balance between what you want to have there and the risks you take. We did talk about basically your examiners reading it. Yeah.
Thanks. So look, Emma, would you like to say something? You're on mute.
Sorry, I'm doing this on my phone today, so I'm having technical difficulties. I just wanted to pick up the point around how just because it's creativity doesn't mean that anything goes. So we talked about creativity within boundaries as well, and the idea that sometimes if you're going to be creative by breaking the rules, that it needs to be obvious to the reader which rules it is that you're breaking. But we also talked about the difficulties of, like, by nature our work is interdisciplinary. We don't tend to focus on work with a specific discipline, and so the idea of creativity to institutional expectations, when sometimes the expectations within a discipline, let alone between the disciplines, let alone across your institution, is not exactly something that you often come across. And we had a bit of a ponder about the nature of how do you encourage creativity when you don't actually know what the boundaries are that you're pushing, because it's not your discipline that you're working with.
Yeah, good point. Okay, maybe we'll pick that up again in the discussion. Maybe Roxanne, the last point from the breakout rooms.
Some of it's just much of what's been said before, but the point was made that that the learning itself is a creative process. So this idea of there's creative and there is academic, the line between that, it can all be viewed as creative, but that there's the difference between when a student is just waffling on and being really flowery and sort of overblown with the language, or trying to create a certain impression and actually knowing how to construct that well. But it seems a lot of the work, and this was a point that I was making, was that there is dissuading people from creativity, to follow the way, and it should be done this way, and your introduction should have to contain this, this, and this. Whereas universities want to be seen as places of new ideas and of challenging the way that things are and of raising questions. But at the same time, can it be actively dissuading people from that, from the very entry levels into it?
Yes, so there's a tension there, isn't there? A big tension. I feel it every day myself. Thanks, Roxanne. So we better move on. So we're going into the AI section. So this is something which is, so maybe I'll come back to that. This is something which is very current, and of course we're all wrestling with it now. And I'm not going to maybe shake up the discourse around this too much, but I just thought maybe, because we've been talking about creativity, academic writing, and maybe bringing this third force, AI, just maybe useful to shine a light on how these things may connect. So just a couple of slides from me. And I thought I'd accentuate the positive here. So starting off with the benefits generative AI might bring to academic writing. So I've been doing a paper on ChatGPT. So this is all refracted through the lens of ChatGPT. And from my perspective, AI is useful for academic writing and creativity in these areas. So giving us a lot of ideas, maybe too many ideas, on a reasonably clear-cut and well-prompted topic. So sequencing these ideas in some sort of order, usually logical, sometimes not so logical, and finding some references to support those ideas, although there's questions about whether these references are real or fake, or where they get them from. But this is an area I think ChatGPT is working on maybe making improvements in that area. Okay, dangers AI might bring to academic writing, and this is from one of my colleagues here at UniMelb, Justin Zabel, and he's talking about it more in the context of graduate research, but I think some of these leak into all academic writing. So AI has got the potential to undermine the role of writing and assessment in education. It's really putting yes, a bomb under everything to do with assessment and yes, how writing fits into assessment. So if a student writer uses it, it could conceal a lack of knowledge around the basics and also how that student communicates. So they might lose their voice or concede their voice to an AI generated voice. So Justin said the learning and retention of difficult tasks, yes, that's removed through this offloading of difficult cognitive tasks. Therefore, it may encourage more superficial learning. Generated text is often inaccurate or trite. So I'm starting to see papers coming through individual tutorials here, which, yes, good word, trite, something to do with a robotic generated idea, and it's not quite working on the page or the screen. And maybe uncreativity comes in there. Questions remain regarding whose text is being generated or redrafting. This is an intellectual property or copyright minefield. And for us, as all advisors, it removes opportunities for working with student writers at crucial points in their writing development. So they might not come and see us or not make contact with us because they're confident or comfortable in the idea that AI is going to do everything for them and they'll just get a good mark. So I was thinking about this, how do all these things connect? So I'm just going to go through three areas. I haven't got a lot of time for these three areas, but they are a little bit foundational. So talking about writing as thinking, talking about the role of divergence and convergence, and then how that all might come together in the confidence to play with writing. And we saw that with Renato. He had this confidence to play with his writing, and he got through his doctorate in quick, smart time. So let's talk about writing as thinking. So this is not something that we talk about a lot as all advisors or writing teachers, but there is a deep connection here. You know, to think well usually involves some sort of writing, personal writing or draft writing, but there's some fundamental links there. Creativity and creative approaches often emerge at the fuzzy edges between this process of thinking and writing. So we've seen AI can help with getting ideas, but we have to think about, yes, how much of a role is it taking and how much of a role is it going to take in future? Seems to be quite good with thesis statements, AI. But one thing it's not good at, I must say, is this disciplinary specific language and what's appropriate for particular disciplinary discourses. But it will get better at this as well. Convergence and divergence. So these are two important concepts. So convergence is about uniformity and standardization, but we can often build creativity from a basis of uniformity or convergence. So it could spring from something quite ordinary, like a template. Creativity is often associated with divergence, so going off in a direction. Yes, often associated with creative expression. So the rub here is that both convergent and divergent thinking style are needed to create an effective piece of writing. We need to tap into both. So convergence by itself won't do it. Divergence by itself won't do it either. Academic writers have to use both. So it's always prone to the push and pull of these forces. The convergence tends to come into its own during editing. Divergence comes really to the fore during ideas generation. But thinking about AI, it's at the heart of any AI program. So if you asked ChatGPT, what are you doing? How are you putting together your answers to this question? And it will tell you it's just collating information from various sources. That I call convergence. It's not inventing, it's not putting up new ideas there. It's just sticking them all together from so many different sources. So look, part of our role with student writers is to help them to play with the rules, because we see student writers and we know that the best writers bend or even break rules. So like Renato, my doctoral student, or the doctoral student I studied, he knew how to bend the rules. I wouldn't say he broke the rules, but he was very creative bending them. And having that force, the courage, the confidence to push forward with that. So look, as third space professionals, we are in a privileged position because we see writing develop. So getting back to what you were talking about in the breakout rooms, we have to think of our place here. Is it to push convergence or divergence or a mixture of both? Yeah, both positions I think can help student writers, but it's not a very comfortable place to sit for us. And we don't tend to talk about it too often. Yes, courage and writer's voice, and having a courageous writer's voice is often the way to produce an acceptable and a creative piece of academic writing. So this idea of courage pops up again. Just going to leave you with a little quote from Renato about playing with the rules. So often this is not something we talk about a lot in academic writing, but there you go. Renato is saying, if you're going on to have success as an academic writer and as an academic, yes, you do need to breach conventions. You do need to come up with new rules. You need to forge new territories. So maybe something to think about there. So look, I'm going to open it up for comments and discussion, and we've got around 10 minutes to go for this. So is everybody happy if we stop there? Probably you'll be really happy to stop there. Just leave up my reference list there for a second. Steve, do you want to take over for a minute? I'll just have a look at what's come through on the chat.
Sure. Yeah, there's quite a few comments on chat, a lot of creative input, actually. It's interesting. I think it was Emma who said before that you certainly can't have a anything goes approach in creativity. And I remember working with an academic on a task review and a rubric creation where she actually did enable anything to be submitted in response to a task. And I'm like, okay, it was so wide, literally, like she said, it could be a drawing, it can be an essay, it can be a song, it can be anything. And I really admired what she was trying to do. So, but I said, are you literally okay if someone hands you in a charcoal drawing versus a 3,000 word paper? And she's like, oh, right, yeah, I didn't think of it that way. So I don't know, Steve, what's your thinking on creativity within limits, which seems oxymoronic, but that's, I guess, what I'm talking about. Are you on? Yeah.
Yes, yep. So yes, I think that's probably where we need to get to with our writers, actually using that word creativity, and maybe showing them what is possible and what might not be possible. I actually had a slide on pedagogy. Just might go back to that for a second. Sorry about this. There it is. Yes, this sort of outing creativity, so talking about it, maybe giving writing workshops, showing student writers how to do it, what's possible, where the boundaries might be. Of course, those would best happen within disciplinary boundaries, because there's so many different views on creativity depending on the discipline people are writing for. And just talking about it with other teachers as well. Yeah, does that answer your question, Steve?
I think so. And it's interesting. I'm not sure it has a definitive answer, does it? I mean, it's that idea of encouraging creativity within the bounds of having something in an assessment context, which has to have some notions of equity to it. So the thing that I was talking about very briefly at the end of my case study about that biology assignment, where students could actually respond to this however they wanted to, but there was some restrictions within it, restrictions built in, so it worked. It was about how the rods of the eye see a sunset or see anything, right? And they could write poetry, or they could write a song, or they could write an essay, but it had sort of equivalence built in, so that what the students were doing at least had an equivalence of the effort they were required to put into to output something. So I think, I guess that's where the answer lies, so that if it's in an assessment context, it has to have some notions of equivalency, because we're going to be marking it. Yeah.
Sorry, do we want to go to Tiana?
Sure, yeah, Tiana, yep.
I had a really good sort of maybe example of an assignment. My background is classics and ancient history, and we got to do 2 assignments in 2 courses that were academic journals. And my lecturer's was a sort of anything go. She said, you can create a painting for me based on the module of this week, but you also need to do some writing and explain it for me and do some analysis of what you've provided. And honestly, it was one of the, I think that's where I grew as a writer, because she gave us options. She said, you can either do the exam and you have to tell me by week 4, or you can do the academic journal where you have to produce writing. You've got 2,000 to 3,000 words, but she's like, you can be innovative. So instead of me writing something for that week, I did a PowerPoint presentation of 2 minutes. And that was, again, creation and innovative sort of, design. And everybody enjoyed it. Everybody really loved it. And it was a way, I think, for students to still have that voice, because they were reflecting on what they were learning in a creative way, and still sort of, again, sticking to that typical academic structure of critiquing and analyzing. So again, it was that creativity within limits and within reason. And I think that maybe more STEM and engineering should perhaps, put that in their pedagogy as well, put that in their assessment instructions, so they're still giving their students a little bit of a time to sort of express themselves in a different way and help them remember the content.
They definitely should. But yes, it might take time, but they might get there eventually. Maybe AI and all the ruptures caused by that will give them a bit of a push start.
Definitely, let's hope so.
Cherie, you've got a comment? Thanks,
yeah,
Tiana.
hi. Thanks, Steve and Steve, for today's session. I just wanted to share an example of what I thought was a creative use of ChatGPT in an assignment. I recently had an appointment with a student who had the assignment remit was that they had to use a prompt. They were given a prompt to put in ChatGPT, and then they had to take the answer to that and then analyze it, look at the limitations, and do a critique of that actual answer based on what they knew from their coursework about that topic. And I thought it was a really good idea, actually, because it was doing two things. It was showing the students that ChatGPT doesn't necessarily give them the right answer or the right response, but also giving them that start, to get going. Some of the things that you said, the idea generation, the sequencing, the finding some of the references. So it allowed them some access into the topic, and it allowed them to be the expert because they were able to critique. So yeah, I just wanted to share that as quite a nice idea.
Sounds good. What discipline area was it from?
Oh, you're asking me now. I can't remember. It was one consultation in many. I can't remember. Something I wasn't familiar with anyway. So
yeah. Well, thanks. Anna, you had a question or a comment?
Oh no, just very quickly. I think we really need to consider when creativity is applied. I feel it's a bit unfair on letting everyone loose in the first semester of the first year. We had someone trying a very creative AI approach in the first semester this year. And the only thing they learned was that students were not able to compare essays written by themselves and AI in the productive manner, because they didn't know how to write essays at a university. So the tutor ended up, it was a large unit, they ended up stepping back and then sort of just doing our work with all the cohorts to say, this is how we do it. So I think it's important to not rush into that higher level. Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, Anna, you made a comment about innovation as well, which was quite interesting in chat. So yeah, I think you pointed out that innovation is such a ubiquitous term, and people are always driven towards innovating. Like you said, your institution was very keen on...
like nothing is accepted if it's not innovation. Yeah. So sometimes you have to break things that aren't broken just to show that you are innovating. So you're not using something that's been working for 3 years. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm tired. It's the end of the semester.
But they don't use it in the same breadth as creativity. It's not, they're not conflating them. They much prefer
Alice and
innovation.
Ha posted some very good comments there, and a link how creativity can be potentially inspired by limitations, because you have to be innovative to actually do something that's required within some limited resources. Yeah,
innovation sometimes is simply to make a process more efficient. That's considered innovation. So it doesn't have to be a brand new idea. It just has a different approach to something.
And it might have a commercial output at the end. I think that's a big part of innovation or innovative thinking. A new product or a new, something which might, go to market, basically.
Well, our unit, academic skills, have just been moved this past year to the Center of Education and Innovation, which used to be called the Learning Teaching Center. So there you go. So we're
it's relabeling, in action there. Okay, so Steve, I don't know, wrap things up, or
I shall.
Going for a while.
Yeah, we've been going. We always try to finish up at 5 o'clock. Can you all join with me in thanking Stephen for his fantastic and very thought-provoking presentation today, as I knew it would be.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. It's great. I really enjoyed being.
And thanks for your contribution as well.
Very, very happy to be involved. It's been a really good finish for the year for me. I think our 5 sessions this year, I'll perhaps talk about this at some point if I get an opportunity at the conference, but to say thank you to the committee. Alice, Tiana, May, I think she had to go, have joined with me in framing these sessions for you. We've really tried hard to bring you 5 varied sessions, and this has been a good way to finish, Steve. So thanks again for presenting it for us.
No worries. See you at the conference, everyone.
See you all at the conference in a few weeks. Wow, how good.
A month. Yep.
A month, a few. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Bye, everyone.
See you.
Recording.